Hey everybody, it's Jo Parr, founder of the Ladies Working Dog Group. Are you feeling stuck with your Gundog training? Trust me, you're not alone, and that's exactly why you need to be here. Every week, we're bringing you the best tips and hacks to make training your Gundog easy peasy. We'll keep it straightforward, no fuss, just actionable guidance that you can put straight to use. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of Found It, Fetched It. In this episode, we're going to be chatting all about how long will it take me to train my Gundog. Joining me for this episode are LWDG Group experts Samantha Thornycroft-Taylor and Claire Denyer. How are we both today, ladies?
Good morning, Jo. Very well, thank you. Lovely to be here.
Really well, thanks, Jo. Sheltering from the wind at the moment.
We are filming this on 24th of January. So if you are listening in February thinking, what wind are they on about? It's because we have yet again another weather warning for our crazy weather here in Britain. Let's talk a little about the myth of training takes any fixed timeline. So what do we think about the fact that people come into this thinking, I need to know if it's going to take me 3 months, 6 months, 1 year? They want to put a timescale on it.
Yeah, so I think what happens for a lot of people, especially if it's their first gun dog, there's so much information on social media, YouTube, on the internet in this day and age, and you can see all this amazing visual of dogs being trained to do fantastic things very quickly at very young ages. And I think it can give a very unrealistic idea to a novice owner as to what really is involved in training a gun dog and how long it takes to train a gun dog. And this can go from breed specifics to age appropriate training, some of the things that we've covered in previous podcasts. But I think social media has a lot to blame for people's unrealistic expectations of what goes into training a gun dog. Sam?
Absolutely that, and I think a lot of it as well, we've got to remember that not only is each individual dog unique and they are an individual, and that goes back to what we always say about train the dog in front of you rather than compare it with your friend's dog down the road or in the next village. But also, we're human, we have a life, we have work, we potentially have family, and that put the brakes on sometimes on your training, or if your dog has an injury. And a lot of people that I've met say their dog has had an injury earlier on in life and it's needed time to rehabilitate and get the dog back to full fitness again. They're then trying to skip ahead because they've got this idea in their mind that at X amount of months, the dog must be doing something. But if it's had a 6-month break, then it's going to be 6 months behind at least. Claire?
Yes, so I'm the prime example of that. So with Jeannie, our youngest dog, she went intermittently lame from around 6 months of age. We had only just really started training. Everything until that point had been puppy play-based training, putting some foundational bits in, and then went intermittently lame, diagnosed with elbow dysplasia, and we've only just started training now. So if you look at her now, if I was to compare her to another dog of her age that hadn't had a 4 to 5 month break in their training, she would be much further on than she is. But essentially, I've got a 14-month-old young dog with a very immature puppy brain because of everything that's happened, with the training of probably, let's say now, about a 7-month-old pup. So I can't compare her to another dog of her age. If I did do that, I could make myself feel quite disappointed, I suppose, in what we've got to and what we've achieved in this time. But instead of looking at that, I'm looking at, due to what she has been through, the other things that she's achieved. They're not the same things, they're different things, but she has achieved great things.
So let's look at the way we look at it when we are training our members. We train our members not in this one overarching time scale, but more in breaking down shall we say, skills, focus, and obedience. So we've got our foundation level, and then we've got our novice level, and then we've got our intermediate level, and then we've got our advanced level. I'm always amazed by how many people at the beginning may have half their foundation level nailed, but not the other half. But then try to get to novice or intermediate. And the thing the dog excels at, they're trying to push up the levels. And then the thing that the dog's not good at, obviously they're just held behind. Do you think it's a case of people not realizing all the foundation needs to be solid before you can go to the next level or the next level, and understanding each level has a time frame?
What it comes down to is the advanced stuff is really cool and really exciting, and it's fun to do. A lot of the foundational stuff can feel quite repetitive, quite monotonous. I think that's the right word. And I think people want to get through it and get onto the advanced stuff really quickly. But I work with a lot of clients, and Sam probably has this the same, where we've had to go back in their let's say they've bought this 2-year-old dog to me, and the dog has some really advanced skills. It really can do some really cracking advanced Gundog work. But there are lots of issues at the foundation level which create some form of, I'm going to call it leaking in the advanced stuff, because the dog can't cope with some of the advanced stuff because the foundations weren't solid. So symptoms of that might be noise, frustration, lunging on the lead, an inability to be steady when other dogs are working around them, consistency in the result of what you're asking the dog to do. Those symptoms are telling you that something at that more foundational or novice level wasn't solid before you move the dog into the next level. So the dog can do that skill, but the minute you ask it to do something more foundational, things start to crumble and fall apart. And I think, so there are so many elements to each level that need time, and some dogs will breeze through certain elements of a foundation level. So it might breeze through learning the retrieve, but it might struggle with steadiness. And then the flip side of that, some dogs might do really well with steadiness and heel work and really struggle with the return of a retrieve. But because the dog's got 80% of the foundation level nailed, the owner believes they can now move on to the next level. But because 20% is not solid, you're going to get at some point some fallout from that later on. Sam?
Yeah, and I think also it sort of comes down to repetition and returning to the foundations throughout your training. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, and I said, if you think about it from a human point of view, we teach children the alphabet, we teach them to form letters and to write words, and their skill set in being able to write and the length of the word they use and the adjectives they put in is forever increasing. And as humans, we never then go, okay, you've reached the age of 21. So now what you need to do is go back and relearn the alphabet again. Dogs aren't human, and they do have to consistently return to those foundations and have them reminded and repeated and reinforced, just to make sure that those foundation levels are wholly cemented and thoroughly concreted in place, so that when we are then moving up through the rest of the levels, we can progress them knowing that the footing is there and it's not going to crumble, and we're not going to get this leakage that Claire said about.
When we talk to some of the best trialers, they tell us they spend loads and loads and loads of their times doing the basics. But we get in our heads, I think, as pet owners, as pet gun dog owners, like, not as a one and done, but like, oh, my dog sits when I give him food, so that's that done. But I don't think we think about the things that affect training time across the age of the dog. So however long the dog is with us, the things that will consistently affect training, because training's never done. So let's talk about a little bit first, like breed traits. Where do we see in breed traits not being fully understood as how they will affect our training times?
There is, dogs dogs of different breeds mature at different rates. That's the easiest one to think about. You know, if you look at some of your HPR breeds, that type of breed, the long ranging breeds, mostly the ones that are designed to work at distance, they're the easiest ones to sort of pinpoint into their own group. They can easily take much, much longer than a Labrador to mature. So you've got to take your time, and you've really got to kind of nurture it out of them sometimes. And if you push them too fast, you can find that they really struggle to consistently make progress, and you do then have to sort of fall back and go right back to the beginning quite a lot of time, because their emotional state just isn't quite together.
Is that a case then, when you've got a self-control of Spaniel, that self-control range, bubble, shall we say, is pretty much in front of you? So is it quicker to correct? The reinforcement, the learning, the lessons can be faster and sharper and neater. But do you think about these like long-ranging breeds? They must have to work so much on like steadiness and self-control, because pretty much most of their choices are made quite away from you.
I aim to increase the distance gradually. So I still work on the same foundations. You know, with a puppy that is HBR breed, I still need them to learn how to come back, learn how to turn on a whistle, learn how to retrieve, and learn how to sit and be steady. And I've always tried to build the distance up gradually, which gives me more of an ability to correct if I need to. But they are designed, you know, everything about them says range, go far. So you almost have to make sure that you've got the foundations doubly set in place, because we know that they are going to be working at such a greater distance than your average Labrador or Spaniel.
Yeah, I mean, the breed specific thing, it always has to be taken into consideration. Also, what has to be taken into consideration is what the handler or owner wants to do with that dog long term. I've got HPRs that train with me. The owners have got no inclination of doing tests and trials with their dogs. They want to do Gundog training for fun, to give some sort of outlet for the dog's natural behaviours. So they don't want their dogs to hunt as wide as a trialing person will want their HPR to hunt. They just don't want them to, because they would feel that wasn't safe for the environment that they walk the dog in, exercise the dog in, train the dog in. That wouldn't be safe. And so for me, so you get some people who will say, oh, you have to go to a specialist in that breed. You have to go to a Spaniel specialist. You have to go to a HPR specialist. You have to go to a retriever specialist. To a degree, I understand those statements if you are wanting to trial your dog. Let's just say you are a very experienced handler and that is your goal. Your goal with that dog is, I'm going to trial. It's not a pet. I'm going to trial this dog. And I will be very honest to people and say, like, I've never trialed a HPR. I don't own a HPR. So clearly I've never trialed a HPR. I don't own a Spaniel. So I've never trialed a Spaniel. However, I've educated myself on what the requirements are, what happens, and what the dog's skill sets are they need to do that. And I'll say, I can get you from here to here, but then you might need to go see a specialist who trials to do that. They might have better ground for that than I've got. They might have better experience in what actually happens in that trial than I can give you. So I think it's always being honest and open, but very few people are wanting that, to be honest, that I work with. Most of the people that I work with, they're doing it for fun, or they're doing it because they enjoy it. They want to do some work in tests, dabble in it, but that's not the reason for the dog. The dog is first and foremost a pet. And I think you will get some trainers who haven't delved into breed traits, breed dispositions, haven't taken the time to research what happens at different breed competitions and how they work. But some trainers that have. And I think it's always then asking those questions, the owner or handler asking those questions of the trainer that they're going to be working with, but also the trainer being honest about their knowledge and their experience and how far they can take you. So breed specifics and breed traits affect the time and potentially what the ultimate goal is of the of the handler or owner of the dog. And I think also location is going to affect that. So around here where I am, there is not ideal HPR ground to find very easily. You know, a spaniel is much, much easier. But that doesn't mean you can't train the skill sets and you can't train the dog to do the things you want it to do. So I think there's so many angles of looking at breed traits and breed specifics. But I think one of the other things that you have to consider is the owner's goals will change over time as well. The more the owner gets into the training, their goals may change. And then so it's having that ability to open that world up for that owner.
No, definitely. And you've touched there about like owner's dedication. I look at my dogs and I know how much I put in daily or how much I put in weekly affects my output. And for people who are training a pup or have a young dog, they have to understand that that does have a big impact in the speed in which you can consolidate learning a new behavior.
Absolutely, it does, you know, and the living conditions of the dog as well, you know, whether they're in the house, whether there are children running around, whether they're kennelled, whether they're taken out once, twice, 8 times a day. It all has this added impact on how long it's going to take to train. And, you know, I guess the short answer really is how long is a piece of string, because there are so many variables, from breed trait to consistency to foundations to personality to owner's personality. You know, the list goes on and on and on. And there just is no one single way that anyone can say this must be done by this age. You know, personally, I have an unwritten rule that I won't take a dog on a shoot until it is at least 2 years old, because I don't believe that they are mentally and emotionally ready by that point. I think that 2 years is a good average to get the training that's needed in. But that, again, is largely based on me knowing my experience and knowing what I would look to be training, you know, what skills I would look to the dog to be having before I move on to the next stage, etc., etc. So, I think the only timeline that I ever really put on a dog, like I say, is minimum 2 years old before it goes on a shoot. But I have had dogs that have been, I had a Labrador years ago that was exceedingly immature, and he was 4 before he went on a shoot. So I don't know, there's just loads of variables. Claire?
Done something there, Sam, and it is really, really important to remember this. And I'm with you. I have that same guideline for when is a dog going to be shoot ready. There are always exceptions to the rule. There are always the odd dog that is just mature from 6 months old and has a level head. And okay, you're still going to have to be very, very careful about growth plates, things like that. But for a certain type of small day, the dog might be ready for an experience, not a season shooting, but an experience. And then you get, like you said, the exceptions the other way, of the dogs that are not ready until they're 4 or 5 years old because of whatever reason. But on top of that, let's just say, if we rewind a little bit and say, let's just say those foundations haven't been solid, but the dog has advanced skills. You might get someone look at that dog and say, that dog's ready to go on a shoot because it can do the advanced stuff. But they might not realise the dog doesn't have solid foundations. So actually then going at that point could be really detrimental, because the dog may completely fry, their brain might completely fry, and the unpicking and undoing of fixing a dog and rectifying problems when a dog has been put in situations it's not ready for yet can take way longer to fix if you get those foundations solid first. That absolutely is the case. The amount of dogs that I work with where they are super talented dogs, but we're having to fix real foundational stuff because they've been put in situations too young, too early, that they weren't ready for. Maybe it was dummy launchers, maybe it was too much shot, maybe it was a shoot. Whatever that reason is, it takes way longer to unpick those things and rebuild than it does to just steadily work your way through the layers and get that.
It also comes down to comparing, doesn't it? Because if you think about it, Say now my dad was still alive and you went to watch him on a shoot. He might have 6 dogs behind him who are all 2+. And he might have 2 pups that are 6 months old. And those 6 months old have been training with those other dogs every single day of their lives. And they just sit steady with them because that's what they've always done. So you're new and you've got your 6-month-old dog. And you think, well, he's out with 2 6-month-old dogs. But those dogs, those pup stories are very different to yours. They've learned this steadiness and self-control, not just of a person handling them, but from a pack they've sat with. They know the game because they look to all the dogs around them and gone, well, we just all sit. And don't get me wrong, they still get things wrong, but an experienced handler with a larger group is more capable, I think, of taking younger dogs because they might only be sitting out on a drive. They might go back in the truck. Another dog might come out for the next drive. You don't see like all these things going on. So if you're sitting there with one dog and judging compared on the dogs you're seeing out, you're never seeing the whole picture.
100% agree.
Absolutely. And like you said, it might be that they're just there for the experience, but they're not actually doing anything, or halfway through the day, there's a really easy retrieve that that your older, more experienced dogs will almost look at you and go, really? You want me to go? I could do that in my sleep. Whereas for a puppy in that situation, that might be the ideal one for them to do. When I say puppy, I mean sort of 6-9 months, obviously not puppy. But if that's where it, I suppose, comes in handy to have a big group of dogs, because you can go, that retrieve is right for that dog, that retrieve is right for that dog. Whereas if you have one dog and you take it out at 9 months old because your neighbour down the road that has a kennel full has had dogs out since they were 6 months old, it can very, very easily fall apart because we've not had enough time at that point to really practice the 3Ds and to layer in the environments. It's all well and good having a young dog that seems mature, that's been introduced to shot and can cope with stopping and redirecting on a retrieve. But are they mentally ready to go into an environment that is really, really fizzed up and has got gunshot and has got hundreds of people and loads of dogs and flags going and everything else, and it's throwing them in too much into the deep end too soon. Something Claire said earlier, I don't know, I think we've spoken about it before, and I think she's had it too, but I've met dogs before that have maybe done a season or done the end of a season, and that went swimmingly. Hasn't been realised, or what doesn't get realised until maybe the beginning of the second season, is that there were parts of the initial training that were missed out or were not quite as advanced as they needed to be. Because when the dog goes out for those first few days, end of the first season, it's like, okay, this is different. I'm just going to take it all in. And it seemingly behaves really, really well and listens to every command. It goes out for the beginning of that second season and the owner is thinking, we nailed it last year. We're absolutely ready for this. And then all of a sudden the wheels fall off because the dog gets there for its second season and it goes, wow, this was amazing last time. Forget all the commands. Don't need to listen to my owner. I know exactly what's expected. And then you've got a dog that is out of control and not coming back and picking up and dropping birds, or not coming back with a bird straight away, or it's sort of throwing one at your feet and legging it off for the next one because it thinks it knows its job, because actually the training failed to begin with. Claire?
I think it is a saying that the dog will tend to go rogue on their second season. But what I see happen quite a lot is people do their first season, the dog has done really, really well, and they almost forget you are training through the spring and summer to prepare your dog for the next season. They get lack on the training in between seasons. They assume everything will just be remembered. They go out and practice a bit of this and practice a bit of that, but maybe don't put the effort into the training that they put into the dog before the first season they took it out. And they just assume the dog's now got it. But actually, what happens most of the time at some point during the second season, and it is for most dogs, the second season, the dog goes, thank you very much. You were a great taxi service. I know my job here. You are no longer required. And quite often, the root cause of that is the dog's just got a little bit, full on a little bit. I know what I'm doing, don't need you. But also the training hasn't been reinstilled during the spring and summer months. And so habits creep in, things creep in. They stop going to a trainer. And so they haven't got that trainer going, right, your dog's just done this and I've just seen this. We need to work on that. Otherwise, this problem may occur. And so, yeah, training really is for life, especially with a working dog, because you've got to go back and put the foundations back in when things start to go awry.
We talked a little bit about things that like sort of accelerate the process, like what pack you're running with, how you've gone out, etc. We see it with our members. Their speed is without doubt accelerated because the learning, we're almost like that person in the pocket saying, have you trained this week? Have you done this? Did you remember not to let that go on the sofa? Did you remember to ask for that sit when you asked for food? So even the things that would normally maybe go lackadaisy, we're that person in the ear just saying, don't let it go now, don't let it go now. But you've also got the thing that I think it was Sam who told me about it when we were talking about one of my dogs many years ago. When you go out to the end of the season, there might be 10% of the birds left. And then when you go out to the beginning of the next season, there's 100% of the birds left. All the dogs around, there's like, it's coming out of autumn into winter. There's still, for most of us now in the UK, it's still acting pretty much like summer. So everything in nature is screaming scent, is screaming alive. And then you are taking this dog that's maybe still under 2 years old and going, have at it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you know, a 2-year-old dog is still such a young dog. A 2-year-old dog, you know, it's not a puppy and it's not a baby, but it is a very young dog. And I think we just have to be mindful of that, you know, all the time. We have to be so mindful that we're not just expecting that just because Mr. or Mrs. very experienced trainer down the road with 6 kennel dogs can achieve this, you know, it doesn't mean everyone can achieve that.
Yeah, and like, not for us to stay on this point too long, but I think it's something we have to get in our heads as owners. You've also got to look at it this way. If your child goes once a week to ballet and has a little bit of a laugh for 30 minutes, great, and I'm sure they love it. But if they're aspiring to be part of the Royal Ballet School at, I don't know, 14, and then you are saying, right, we are out in different lessons 5 days a week. The commitment is at least an hour in class and an hour stretching afterwards. A person trialing tends to be getting ready for the ballet school. The person who just wants to pop out is the opposite side. And if you think of the difference of amount of hours done, it's massive over a week, a month, a year. It's huge. The dog that's a year-old trialing has probably had the equivalent of maybe a lifetime of a pet dog.
100%, you know, and there is a different mindset involved with the owner, with the handler as well. It's, I'm taking my dog out to go training and then my dog's going away again. And it doesn't mean that they love their dog any less or that the dog is any less of a family member. But we do find when we're working with, you know, pet dog owners, whether or not they want to take their dog onto the shooting field, they are a pet first and foremost. And so, you know, they might go with their owner to the pub for dinner or a few drinks. They might go away on holiday with them and not have any real training, just staying close while they're walking across the Lake District, you know, and there are so many different rules involved that come in from the owner and the handler, and that affects, dedication is the wrong word, but it kind of affects the dedication. Neither of them are any more or less dedicated, but it's a different type of dedication.
Yeah, one is a competitive dedication, and that takes far bigger dedication. Like if you're training for the Olympics or you're training just to go for a swim with your family, you expect a different output.
Exactly that, yes.
I ask myself this question very, very regularly. Joanne, do you want to do it to the level of commitment it requires? And my answer through everything we've been through over the last couple of years has been no. So then I can't expect to trial a dog if I haven't got the time or mental capacity for the commitment. And that's not a bad thing, you know. I'm quite happy having the pet Gundog. I'm really, really happy with it. But you can't expect one without the other.
Yeah, 100%. And that's not to say you've got to train your dog 7 days a week. You know, that's not good for most dogs. But you've got to have the commitment to do what needs to be done to get your dog to that level. And for a lot of pet owners, they want to have fun with their dog. They want to go out and have a mooch with their dog. Like you said, take the dog to the park, all those sorts of things. So yeah, I think it's always just being realistic and being honest with yourself as well. You know, being really honest with yourself about what you want to achieve and what you're prepared to do to achieve those things. And I think, you know, we have to also just always consider consistency and clarity for the dog in these situations. And so if we're not decided in our head what we want to achieve and how we're going to achieve it, we're probably not going to be giving those consistent and clear messages to the dog. Because if we don't know, how on earth is our dog supposed to know? And they're a different species to us.
And I think that comes in as well as to, you know, remembering that every interaction with your dog is a training opportunity. You know, be that you've got the kettle boiling and you want to do a sit stay, or dinner's in the oven and you want to do a bit of steadiness or a couple of retrieves in the garden. You know, it's easy to go, okay, you didn't stay there, or you followed me out of the room, or you jumped on the sofa and you're not supposed to be there, but actually I'm just going to let you get away with it for a day or two. And then it happens a few more times, and I think I quite often end up saying this point, but you sit down on the sofa one day with a cup of coffee, the dog launches itself at you, you're wearing your coffee, not drinking your coffee, and you go, right, time to clamp down, rules have changed. But that week of allowing it is lack of consistency and giving mixed messages to the dog, and things have no longer been black and white. There's been this grey area in between, and that also can have an effect, a massive effect, on how long does it take to train a dog.
And I think this again, yeah, that consistency or lack of consistency, lack of clarity, confusion for the dog makes it longer. But also part of that is so often people are putting human emotions onto a dog. Yes, dogs have emotions. We're not saying they don't. They have emotions, but they have canine emotions. But we're humanizing the dog. You know, oh, the dog's going to be distraught if I don't let it jump on the sofa. Is it really? You know, so I think it really doesn't help if we start humanizing the dog and putting how we feel onto the dog. And then actually we're creating more issues for the dog, more problems for the dog, because we're not giving them that clarity, we're not giving them that consistency. And then that's why sometimes it can feel like a carousel. You're going round and round and round in a pattern, which is even worse than a roller coaster. So first of all, break the carousel and do a roller coaster, and then get consistent, continued improvement.
Let's talk about this idea, like we've touched upon it. When will my Gundog training be finished? What's our sort of answers to that? Because we've touched upon the fact that it's never, a dog's training never ends. But what do we actually mean by that? Because we're not necessarily going to be teaching them brand new skills all the time up to the age 14, are we?
We're not. And I think, you know, that you just said the word I was going to use. When is a Gundog's training finished? Never. Because there is always something that you can move on to or progress, you know, and that might even just be the distance of a retrieve, or the distance that your stop whistle is absolutely pitch perfect at, you know, that sort of thing. Yes, we get to a certain point in training if you can take your dog out with loads of distractions and it has good self-control. It doesn't obviously chase things. It will stop on the whistle and listen to commands when it's at distance, and it can cope with all the pressure and excitement of a shoot day. And also when it can, in parts, use its own head. And this is where I say, you know, Gundog training is always very contradictory, because we spend the first 6 months, 2 years of a dog's life saying, don't go too far away from me, absolutely don't chase anything, and don't use your own head, listen to everything I tell you. And then we put them in a shoot field environment and we say, okay, now what I need you to do is go hundreds of yards away from me, chase the pricked bird, and if it goes through a fence or over a wall, you've got to use your own head to figure it out, because I'm not there with you. So I think when your dog is in a position that you can handle it, but also it will honestly use its own head to the better of everybody rather than just for the better of itself, then it is in a good position to say, if there is ever such a thing, you know, it's fully trained. And I say that sort of in inverted commas. but there is still always things that you can go back and you can tweak and you can put a little bit more emphasis on, and keep it going and keep it progressing. Claire?
I agree. And I think the way I kind of would look at that is, okay, so you might get your dog to the level that you had aspired to get your dog to, whether that be a working test level or a shoot day level or just a high level of obedience out in the park level, whatever that goal was. Once you achieve that, there has to be a level of maintenance training to maintain it. Otherwise, it will start to whittle away. And so I think, again, that's where I say to people, like, just because you've achieved that and got there doesn't mean your training is done. There is a level of commitment of training to maintain what you've achieved, because otherwise bad habits just start to creep in, and before you know it, your good solid recall is not so good and solid. Your stop whistle at distance becomes more sporadic. So that's where continuation of training to maintain that level is so important.
If we bring this into a way that everybody listening, or most people, will understand, though, it's like things like slimming clubs, isn't it? You work at something really, really hard, you reach a goal, and then they say you need to consistently track or what you eat or what your points are or wherever one it is, and then they say, and you have to come to maintenance class, and people are like, yeah, I don't. And then before they know it, all those like little problems have crept back in, and then they're back at the beginning to do it all again. And it literally is that cycle with our dogs. If we're not tracking, if we're not maintaining, if we're not consistently making sure that we don't lose the good habits, then we're going to end up back with all the bad habits.
100%. I couldn't agree more, Jo.
Thank you both for another amazing podcast. I'm sure our listeners are going to absolutely love it. I hope the listeners are getting used to our once a fortnight episode. It is very different, but we think it's a fabulous way for us to make sure we bring you quality stuff that we haven't covered before. And also it gives us a little more time to look at the questions you might have. So as I asked in the last episode, if you do have any questions, please send them in to us. We would love to answer them for you. Thank you to both our experts for being wonderful as always, for being fun as always. Thank you all for listening. We hope you've enjoyed. Please subscribe, please review, and we look forward to seeing you in a fortnight's time for the next episode. That's it for today's episode. A massive thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to head over to the LWDG and sign up for our membership. Get access to expert-led training, a wonderfully supportive community, and the resources you need to become a confident and skilled gun dog trainer. Let's take this journey together, because no woman should have to train her gun dog alone. We'll see you all next week.